The lecture hall aboard the Zorian academic vessel hummed with excitement as eager students prepared for an experience unlike any other. They had traveled light years for this exchange program, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study the baffling creatures known as humans. Professor Vixer, a towering figure with bioluminescent skin, stood at the front of the room and tapped a hollow pad, causing a list of substances to materialize in the air. "These compounds," he began, his voice steady, "are classified as toxic. Most cause severe biological distress, and some are lethal upon ingestion. Others slowly degrade organic tissue over time." The students, their translucent eyes wide with concentration, absorbed the information, some recoiling at the mention of certain chemicals, arsenic, ethanol, capsaicin. They took diligent notes, but there was an undercurrent of disbelief. How could any species willingly expose themselves to these deadly substances? The professor continued, his tone unwavering, "Your assignment is to observe humans in their natural environment and document their interactions with these substances." The students murmured nervously, exchanging glances, the idea of humans willingly consuming toxins utterly incomprehensible to them. A field trip was arranged to a human settlement, a bustling marketplace on Earth. The students, disguised in hollow shifts to blend in, followed their guide through the crowded streets. The air was thick with a cacophony of scents, some pleasant, others alarmingly pungent. One student, Zol, paused near a food stand, where a human man was flipping sizzling objects on a metal slab. The smell was sharp, almost acrid. Zol checked his data pad, which confirmed his suspicions. "Capsaicin," he muttered under his breath, a known irritant. The human behind the counter, noticing the curious student, smiled and held up a small red fruit. "You want some?" he asked. Zol hesitated, his body tense. "This contains capsaicin. It's harmful," Zol warned. But the man merely popped one into his mouth with a grin, barely breaking a sweat. "Oh yeah, it burns, but that's the fun part." Zol recoiled in shock. "You are consuming a biological irritant, for enjoyment." "Pretty much," the man shrugged, popping another one in. Aboard the Zorian academic vessel, a colossal, obsidian black ship drifting silently through the void of space. Deep within its core lies a lecture hall unlike any found on Earth. The chamber breathes with a gentle bioluminescent glow, like the pulse of a living organism. The walls curve organically, lined with swirling patterns of light blue veins that throb with energy. Floating data orbs spin lazily in the air, casting faint holographic shadows across the tiered rows. Hundreds of Zorian students sit in eerie silence. Their bodies are slender and semi-translucent, as if carved from living crystal. Their oculars large, multifaceted eyes blink in perfect unison, absorbing every photon, every movement. At the center of the room floats Professor Vixer, suspended a meter above the obsidian floor. His form is larger, more imposing, skin faintly glowing with green-blue iridescence, and his 6 fingers clasping a hovering hollow pad with surgical precision. A strange quiet hums through the room, part electricity, part tension. In the far reaches of known space, on a vessel not bound by atmosphere or gravity, a lesson begins. The Zorian Academic Council, ancient and revered, has chosen to study one of the galaxy's most baffling anomalies, the species called humans. Professor Vixer, tone measured, yet full of restrained fascination. "These are classified toxins." With a graceful gesture, he activates the hollow pad. A shimmering list of substances appears in the air, each name glowing in crimson red, accompanied by molecular diagrams that rotate slowly. Professor Vixer, Cont D. Some are corrosive, capable of melting tissue in seconds. Others target the nervous system, causing paralysis or death. A few degrade cellular structure over time, leaving only rot and silence behind. He pauses, letting the weight of his words settle like dust in gravity. Close up. The glowing words: arsenic, ethanol, capsaicin, hydrogen sulfide, caffeine. Each one pulses ominously, surrounded by rotating hazard icons and multi-species biological warning tags. Student 0E, soft, barely audible. Why would anyone willingly ingest these? Student Zol, nervously clutching his data pad. They say, humans do. Several students turn their oculars toward him at once, blinking slowly. Whispers ripple through the air like waves on a distant ocean. Professor Vixer, with clinical certainty. Your assignment is simple. You will journey to the origin world Earth. Observe the humans in their native habitats. Record every interaction with these substances. Measure biological response. Document behavioral intent. A faint shift in the room unease. Several students begin adjusting their internal translators, prepping for environmental protocols. They are scientists, not explorers. They had studied solar plasma ingestion in helionids, and neuroshock respiration in the crystalline beings of Sector 6. But none had prepared them for the chaos, the contradiction, the sheer biological madness, of Earth. They did not yet know that what awaited them was not just consumption, but a philosophy where pain was not avoided, but embraced, where poison was not rejected, but savored, and where suffering was not feared, but turned into ritual. Earth, southeast quadrant of the planet, in a sprawling marketplace beneath artificial neon suns. It's early evening. The sky above is tinged with orange haze and city smog. Sounds clash, distant honking, sizzling metal, voices shouting over one another in dozens of human languages. The Zorian students walk in formation, cloaked in holographic projection suits that distort their outlines into approximate humanoid forms. To human eyes, they appear as oddly pale tourists in dull coats. But behind those projections, their oculars spin, widen, and shift color in real time, collecting, measuring, absorbing. The marketplace itself is chaos incarnate. Colors too bright. Smells too strong. Sounds too sharp. Steam rises from open grills. Oil bubbles in large pans. Spices float like chemical clouds in the air. To Zorian biology, it feels like walking through a low-level biohazard zone. Zol slows to a halt near a food stall. A human male, his hair messy and dark, stands behind a steaming metal slab, flipping irregular red-brown shapes. Sparks pop as oil meets moisture. Zol raises his scanning tool. A warning blinks red. Warning sign: compound detected, capsaicin. Status: biological irritant, level 4. Effects: pain, sweating, tissue irritation. Zol takes a cautious step back. The human notices. His eyes are amused, gleaming with some internal fire. He holds up a small, glistening red object. It shines under the flickering neon lights like something dangerous and alive. Human, grinning. You want one? Chili pepper. Fresh batch. Zol's voice falters. His translator buzzes quietly. Zol. This contains capsaicin. It is harmful. Without hesitation, the man tosses one into his mouth and bites. A crunch. Then chewing. His face barely changes, but a sheen of sweat begins to form on his forehead. He swallows and sighs. Human. Yeah, it burns. That's the fun part. Zol blinks rapidly. He steps back again. Zol, to the others. He is consuming a known bioirritant, for enjoyment. Across the aisle, another student VN is standing by a different stall. A woman stirs a pot with a long wooden rod. The liquid inside is dark red, thick, and releasing dense, fragrant vapor. VN's scanner pulses. Warning sign: compound detected, ethanol. Status: neurotoxin, level 3. Effects: impaired motor control, memory loss, neural suppression. VN: you are drinking this. The woman ladles a steaming portion into a paper cup and lifts it to her lips. Her smile is relaxed, almost nostalgic. Woman: sure. Mulled wine. Warms you up real nice. VN: this damages your cognitive systems. Woman, laughing softly: only if you drink too much. She takes another sip. Several of the Zorian students exchanged rapid glances. Their oculars flicker in warning colors. Their biology screams for retreat, but the humans continue to laugh, to eat, to drink. Down the walkway, a man opens a small tin. Inside, a brown, oily fish curled unnaturally. A pungent, sulfuric wave slams through the air. Professor Vixer stops mid-step. His sensory nodes flare with alarm. Vixer: that scent, hydrogen sulfide. The human beams with pride. Human. Fermented fish. Swedish recipe. It's called surströmming. Ziri. That is, toxic. Human, shrugging. Yeah, it stinks. But the taste? Not bad if you hold your breath. One Zorian nearly collapses from the chemical overload. Zol's voice is barely a whisper. Zol: how are they alive? Vixer doesn't answer. The air hangs thick with the scent of smoke, spice, and contradictions. All around them, humans are willingly introducing poisons into their bodies without fear, without caution, with joy. Something is deeply wrong. Or, something is deeply different. Deep within the Zorian vessel lies the observation wing, a pristine and sterile expanse carved from dark crystal and lined with bioreactive lighting. The walls shift in hue with emotional resonance, pulsing faintly now in shades of unease. A curved window arcs above the room, revealing stars beyond, cold, distant, and silent witnesses. 3 humans have arrived. They stand casually at the entrance of the test chamber, flanked by motionless Zorian guards whose eyes glow like polished amber. The humans look underwhelmed. One of them is a woman, confident and composed, dressed in a dark flight jacket bearing insignia from the Earth Diplomatic Corps. Her name is Captain Reyes. To her left, a tall man with a weathered face and an old scar running down his forearm. Davis. He leans back on one foot, his posture relaxed, as if walking into a local diner. To her right, a quiet figure, Lieutenant Harris, short cropped hair, steaming cup in hand. The scanner immediately pings his drink. Warning sign detected, caffeine. Status: stimulant, neural agitant. Effects: increased heart rate, anxiety, addictive potential. The Zorian students stare. Vixer, approaching slowly: we appreciate your participation in this cooperative study. Our observations suggest your species regularly consumes compounds considered hazardous to most forms of life. Today, we will test those limits. Under strict control. Reyes, smiling calmly. Sounds fun. Vixer, blinking rapidly. It is not intended to be. A platform rises from the floor, smooth and black, with 3 seats, each surrounded by transparent shielding and a suite of scanning instruments. Tubes and sensors hover like curious insects. On a separate panel, samples await, each in its own containment field, glowing faintly with color-coded warnings. Red for pain. Yellow for neural impact. green for metabolic disruption, black for unknown. Zori, whispering nervously. They volunteered for this. Zol, still pale. They didn't even ask what the tests are. The humans take their seats without hesitation. Davis. Let's get spicy. The sample tray slides toward Davis. A chunk of neutral food soaked in a searing red liquid. The scanner whines. Warning, extreme irritant, concentration exceeds field observation by 640%. Vixer. This dose should trigger immediate pain response, glandular overload, and Davis eats it. He chews. Slowly. His jaw clenches. Beads of sweat rise instantly along his brow. His chest rises sharply. Then he laughs. Davis, horse. That's got a kick. VN, horrified. You are experiencing acute suffering. Davis. Yeah. But it's a good burn. The room is silent. Instruments spike. Biological readings blink frantically across Zorian displays. Reyes receives a small vial of clear liquid. She swirls it once. Smells it. Drinks. Pauses. Reyes. Mild, got anything stronger? The Zorians exchange a flurry of glances. Another vial slides forward, then another. By the third, her eyes narrow slightly but her words remain clear. Vixer. Your neural activity is fluctuating. Memory centers suppressed. Coordination. Reyes, interrupting. I can still spell neurotoxin, Professor. Want me to? Harris is still sipping his drink. Zori. You have not stopped consuming that compound. Harris, casually. Didn't know I was part of the test. But, already ahead of you. Zol. Your heart rate is elevated beyond safe limits. Harris, sitting again. That's just called Monday. Monitors flash. Gases hiss. Bio readouts flare in colors the Zorian have never seen before. Their data models struggle to keep pace. Zori, overwhelmed. They don't resist the effects, they accept them. Zol. They treat it like a ritual. VN. Like entertainment. Professor Vixer, quietly, almost reverently. They embrace discomfort, willingly. The humans sit unshaken. Davis breathes steadily, though his cheeks are flushed. Reyes reclines slightly, arms crossed, her eyes calm. Harris taps his cup against the seat, as if keeping rhythm with the heartbeat of something far older than any Zorian algorithm can calculate. And then Davis speaks again, voice low, amused. Davis. You know this isn't even our weirdest Tuesday, right? Several hours have passed. The Zorian test chamber has grown quiet, almost reverent. The faint hum of machines fills the air, like a cathedral of logic trying to comprehend a holy paradox. 3 humans remain seated in their respective diagnostic pods. Around them, translucent screens flicker with incomprehensible data, glowing symbols, fluctuating biovitals, chemical breakdowns. None of it adds up. Zorian students hover behind observation walls, their faces lit only by the glow of confusion. Inside his pod, Davis shifts uncomfortably. Davis, grumbling, half laughing. That chili's doing laps in my stomach. Zori. Your internal temperature is rising. Acid production is peaking. Nerve signals are flaring. You are in distress. Davis, wincing slightly. Yep. That's what it feels like. It'll pass. Zol. You knew this would happen. Davis. Of course I did. The Zorian observers go still. The idea settles over them like fog. Ziri, quietly. He knew, and continued. In another pod, Captain Reyes taps a finger against the metal frame. Her eyes are closed, her breathing controlled. Ethanol levels in her bloodstream have reached a point that, by Zorian standards, should have triggered unconsciousness. VN. Your body is processing the toxin. Your liver is accelerating. Reyes, opening one eye. That's what livers do. Filter the bad stuff. Vixer. The rate is inconsistent. Variable. Reyes. Yeah. Not everyone's built the same. Some of us can drink more than others. Vixer, processing. Your internal systems, adapt. She nods slowly. Reyes. We build tolerance. The more you're exposed, the better your body handles it. Ziri, in disbelief. You train your body using poison. Reyes, smirking. Pretty much. In the third pod, Harris is now reclined, one arm behind his head, still sipping the same cup of coffee. The caffeine concentration in his blood is now several times beyond recommended galactic safety limits. Zol. You should be in neural distress. Hallucinating. Experiencing cardiac strain. Harris, casually. Honestly, I'd be worse without it. Vixer, stepping closer. Your biology doesn't reject toxins, it accepts them. Incorporates them. Depends on them. A long silence follows. Ziri, voice shaking. This is not adaptation. This is symbiosis with suffering. Davis, chuckling. You say that like it's a bad thing. The Zorian screens flash another set of anomalies. Inside Davis's pod, healing has already begun. The inflamed tissues in his digestive tract are regenerating. Microabrasions on the tongue caused by capsaicin are gone. Enzymes flood his bloodstream, damping the chemical fire. Recovery, in motion. Zol. His cells are repairing. Without aid. VN. He's regenerating. Davis, raising one eyebrow. It's called healing. He rolls up his sleeve. The scar on his forearm is jagged but faded. Davis. Got this a few years back. Acid burn. Hurt like hell. Grew back on its own. Not pretty, but works. Ziri. You, regenerate. After damage. Reyes. Not instantly. But yet. We heal. Break a bone, it resets. Burn the skin, it grows again. Harris. Some slower than others, but we all bounce back eventually. Vixer steps away, his thoughts scattered. His bioluminescence dims, flickers, changes color like a storm beneath glass. Vixer, to himself. You endure. You adapt. You recover. Then he turns back toward them. Vixer. You suffer, and survive. Reyes, leaning forward slightly. Sometimes suffering is how we survive. The Zorians say nothing. No words. Only blinking lights and endless data streams failing to explain what stands before them. Humanity. A species that welcomes poison, dances with discomfort, and walks willingly through fire not because they must, but because they choose to. And still they smile. The observation deck has dimmed. The walls no longer glow steady, instead, they pulse faintly, as if reflecting the mental disturbance rippling through the Zorian minds. Vixer stands alone in front of a central console, his 6 fingers hovering inches above the interface. He has reviewed the data a dozen times. Every biological law, every cellular model, every rule they had relied on for generations, has failed. Behind him, the human delegation remains in their diagnostic pods relaxed, chatting softly. As if nothing out of the last few hours was strange to them. Zori, quietly. Professor, we have seen anomalies before. But this? Zol. This is not mutation. Not chance. This is something else. Vixer, without turning. They treat danger like an old friend. Pain, like a teacher. He finally speaks up, addressing the humans directly. Vixer. I must ask, why? Why does your species engage in behaviors that lead to harm? Why willingly ingest substances that hurt you? What do you gain from this? Captain Reyes leans forward slightly in her pod. The overhead lights catch the reflection in her eyes, not challenge, not defiance, but understanding. Reyes, thoughtfully. There's a few reasons. Some of it's cultural. Some of it's just fun. The word hangs in the air like static. Zori, puzzled. Fun? You define chemical suffering as fun. Davis, grinning. Well, yeah. It's about pushing limits. Seeing what we can take. Zol. But, pain is a warning. Discomfort is a signal to stop. Harris, nodding slowly. And sometimes we listen. But other times, we don't. Because pain isn't always the enemy. He sips his now lukewarm coffee. Silence falls again, until Reyes speaks once more. Reyes. You ever heard of vaccines? A flicker of confusion passes through the Zorian ranks. Vixer. No. Explain. Reyes. We introduce small amounts of dangerous agents into our bodies on purpose. Just enough to trigger a response. Our systems learn. They build resistance. So when the real threat comes, we're ready. Zori, staggered. You, infect yourselves, voluntarily. Davis, nodding. It's training. Controlled exposure. Little pain now, less pain later. VN, quietly. You make yourselves sick, to avoid future sickness. Harris, smiling. Exactly. The revelation stuns them more than any data scan ever could. Zol. So you do not merely survive poison, you weaponize it. Reyes exhales slowly, arms crossed. Reyes. We call it building tolerance. And it's not just biology. It's mindset. Vixer, softly. Mindset. He looks again to the screens, to the pain thresholds, to the chemical saturations, to the regenerating tissue. But it's no longer just about the body. It's about the choice. The students murmur quietly among themselves. The implications are dizzying. Zori, whispering. They suffer, on purpose. VN. They endure, by will. Davis, smirking. We grow through it. The more you face discomfort, the less control it has over you. Zol. That is not science. That is philosophy. Reyes, calmly. Maybe. But it works. Vixer lowers his head, blinking slowly. Vixer. I was trained to study life forms, to classify them, to decode their logic. But there is no formula here. Your species breaks every rule. He gestures toward the humans, voice hollow with awe. Vixer. You consume what is toxic. You recover from what should cripple. You seek out what should be avoided. And you name it pleasure, strength, growth. Reyes, softly. We don't always win. We bleed. We fall. But every time, we get back up. That's who we are. The Zorians fall silent. Some press fingers against their own arms, as if imagining scars they've never had. Others simply stare not at monsters, not at miracles, but at something far more impossible. A species that invites pain, and calls it preparation. The lights in the lab have dimmed to a cool violet. The walls now pulse with slow, deliberate waves of visual cue of uncertainty. Instruments have been recalibrated. The initial data from earlier trials was not enough. Now the tests must go deeper. More extreme. Closer to the edge. 3 new containment chambers rise from the floor. Inside, sealed trays with concentrated substances, each one labeled not just toxic, but lethal under normal conditions. None of the humans flinch. Professor Vixer. These samples exceed common environmental concentrations by orders of magnitude. You are under no obligation to proceed. Reyes, already stepping forward. Let's see what you've got. Ziri. This is not a game. Davis, grinning. No. This is Tuesday. The paste is viscous, glowing faintly orange under UV. 1 drop could cause blistering in most known species. It hisses slightly as it's applied to food. Davis takes the offered piece, pauses for half a second, then eats it. He chews with a controlled rhythm. His face turns red. A tear escapes one eye. He exhales like a dragon trying not to show fire. Davis, through clenched teeth. That's beautiful. Zol. You are experiencing mucosal damage. Your nerve endings are firing erratically. Davis, panting. That's how you know it's working. Ziri. Working. Davis. If it doesn't hurt, it doesn't matter. A mist forms in a sealed chamber. Reyes steps in. Breathes it in. Her posture remains straight, composed. VN. Cognitive suppression should begin in under 90 seconds. Reyes starts listing planets of the outer Terran systems. Then backwards. Then in reverse alphabetical order. Reyes, calmly. Still here. Her blood saturation levels spike. Her liver kicks into hyperdrive. The machines tracking her systems can predict the next 5 minutes. Vixer, murmuring. She is overriding the effects. Ziri. No. She's dancing with them. A direct infusion. A dose that, by standard measures, should induce tremors or cardiac arrhythmia. Harris doesn't blink. He sits in the pod, hands behind his head, eyes half-lidded like he's meditating. Zol. Your heart rate is erratic. Your neural activity is overloaded. Harris, yawning. That's just focus. VN, confused. You're calm. But your brain is in overdrive. Harris. Exactly. The data floods the Zorian system's numbers, biometrics, chemical breakdowns, none of it fits. They try to cross-reference with known species. Nothing comes close. Vixer, frustrated. This isn't resilience. This is something else. A rejection of limits. A defiance of logic. Davis steps out of his pod, face still flushed but smiling. Davis. You call it defiance. We call it growth. Ziri, almost whispering. But you're hurting. Now. Actively. Reyes, firmly. And we'll heal. Harris. We always do. VN. You treat damage like routine. Reyes. It is. That's how we become more than what we were yesterday. The lab falls silent. Machines continue to beep. Readings continue to spike. But no one is paying attention to the data anymore. Because the Zorians now understand, they were never just testing the body. They were watching a species that has made pain a tool. A species that turns suffering into practice. A species that doesn't wait for survival, but builds it one scar at a time. And in this moment, the Zorian students realize they are not studying endurance. They are witnessing intention. The test is over. The lights in the chamber return to a soft neutral tone, but the atmosphere remains heavy. The Zorian observers have stopped recording. Stopped analyzing. They are watching now not as scientists, but as beings who've seen something they cannot explain. Davis sits on the edge of his pod, sipping water. Sweat still clings to his skin, but his breathing has calmed. His eyes are steady. Reyes wipes her forehead with a sleeve. She looks perfectly aware. Awake. Present. Harris twirls the empty cup between his fingers, lost in thought. Vixer, quietly. We have studied hundreds of species, charted their genomes, catalogued their weaknesses and strengths. He walks slowly toward the center of the room. Vixer, can't D. But never have we encountered one that seeks its own limits. That leans into harm. That learns through injury. He turns toward Reyes. Vixer. Why? What compels you to do this? She meets his gaze, then answers simply. Reyes. Because pain tells the truth. The words hit the air like thunder. Ziri. The truth, of what? Reyes, calmly. Of what you're made of. Of who you really are, when things get hard. Pain strips away comfort. It shows you where you break. And then, it dares you to come back stronger. Davis. We don't like it. We're not masochists. But we understand it. We respect it. Zol, softly. You use pain, as a mirror. Harris. As a weapon. As a compass. As a challenge. Vixer. But it damages you? Reyes. So does time. So does love. So does loss. But we live through it anyway. There's a pause. A long one. Reyes, can't D. We aren't strong because we feel no pain. We're strong because we feel it and keep moving. Ziri, quietly. But pain, it breaks things. Davis. And then we rebuild. He lifts his arm again, showing the old scar. Davis. This isn't a flaw. It's proof that I got through something. Harris. You don't really know yourself until something breaks you? Vixer, almost whispering. You do not fear pain. You befriend it. Reyes nods. Reyes. It teaches. It tempers. The things we're most proud of, they usually hurt to earn. The students look among themselves. Their faces reflect something alien, not fear, not admiration, but a kind of spiritual unease. A reckoning. Zol. Your biology is strange. But your mind, it's stranger. Davis, smirking. That's the real power, isn't it? Ziri. You push yourselves, just to see how far you can go. Reyes. Every day. That's how we grow. Not in safety, but in struggle. Harris. The pain you survive becomes the strength you carry. The room is still. And then something happens. The wall behind the pods shifts, morphs. A new hologram forms. Not one projected by Zorian hands. It's a spontaneous data correlation built by the AI to try and make sense of what it's seen. On screen, a model of the human body. But overlaid on it are scars. Tears. Broken bones. Chemical burns. Then slowly those wounds fade, replaced by strengthened tissue, neural remapping, and enhanced hormone regulation. The system labels the result. Human resilience factor, emergent trait. Catalyst, repeated controlled suffering. Projected evolutionary benefit, high. The Zorian are speechless. Vixer, staring at the screen. You do not survive pain, you convert it. Reyes steps forward, voice steady, words like a creed. Reyes. Pain sharpens the edge. And we are the blade. The humans have been escorted from the chamber for rest and recovery. Their vitals remain under observation, but they are no longer the center of the room. Now, only the Zorian remain. The once silent students now shift nervously in their places. The glowing glyphs along the walls pulse erratically, reflecting fragmented thought patterns and emotional disturbances never before recorded in this room. Professor Vixer stands at the center, eyes dimmed, his voice quiet. Vixer. We set out to study their biology. Their thresholds. Their limitations. He pauses. Looks down at his own hands, long, elegant, but trembling. Vixer, softly. But what we uncovered was something deeper. Something we were not prepared to face. The students say nothing. Not yet. Ziri, tentatively. Professor, if we were subjected to the same trials, the same levels of chemical distress, would we have survived? Vixer doesn't answer. Zol, quietly. We would not. A hush falls. Heavy. Uncomfortable. VN. Our systems are efficient, precise. But we are not made for volatility. We are not made for suffering. Ziri. We avoid pain. We isolate it. Remove it. Zol. They invite it in. They make a place for it. One student leans against the wall. Another clutches their lower appendages, as if chilled. Ziri, voice trembling. What if it's not just tolerance? What if it's evolution? Vixer. It is. The word hangs like a blade. Vixer, firmly. Their biology is chaotic. But it is adaptive. Their minds are erratic. But they are unshackled. Where we design comfort, they train for crisis. He walks slowly past the rows of students. Vixer. They bend. They bleed. They fall. He stops. Turns. Vixer. And then they rise. Zol, barely audible. What does that mean, for us? VN. If the universe one day shifts, if entropy tears down the order we build, if survival becomes chaos. Ziri. Would we endure? No one answers. The truth is already known and it cuts deeper than any chemical burn. The students begin reviewing the data again. Not to understand humans, but to understand what they are not. And what they might never become. Ziri, softly. They turn poison into challenge, pain into growth. VN. We would not call that strength before. But now, I wonder. A new data string appears on the observation screen. Not generated by experiment but by one of the student terminals. A private analysis. Zorian Resilience Index, predictable. Human Resilience Index, unstable but ascending. Outcome under prolonged catastrophic stress. Zorian collapse. Human adaptation likely. The room falls to silence again. A kind of silence they've never known. Vixer, almost to himself. We are not weaker. But they are, something else. Something more volatile. More dangerous. More enduring. The students exchanged glances not with fear of humans, but fear of comparison. They were the observers. Now they are the subjects. And deep inside, a quiet voice begins to whisper in every Zorian mind. Would I survive what they have? Zorian Council Chamber. A darkened, spherical room filled with floating symbols and silent observers. The walls are semi-transparent, revealing distant stars outside cold, eternal, and indifferent. The professors, researchers, and senior scholars have gathered in a closed session. The data from the human trials floats above them in a spiraling helix of color, motion, and numbers. It glows crimson at the edges, signals of stress, pain, and chemical trauma. At the center, one single, looping image. Davis, mid-chew. Sweat on his brow. Smile on his lips. He's eating fire and calling it joy. High scholar Verilyn. They consumed levels of chemical irritants that exceed tolerance thresholds for 90% of galactic life. With awareness. With willingness. Scholar D'Evre. They anticipated damage, and walked into it. Vixer, quietly. Yes. And then they recovered. No one speaks for several seconds. Only the sound of distant system hums, like the breath of a sleeping ship. Scholar Talon. We have seen species adapt. We have seen species endure. But we have not seen this philosophy. This weaponization of fragility. High Scholar Verilyn. We modeled the human pain response as a biological signal. But for them, it is more. It is a choice. Scholar D'Evre. They seek it out. A young Zorian steps forward from the shadows. Her eyes are bright, but there is fear behind the glow. Student Ziri, tentatively. Is that what makes them dangerous? All eyes turn to her. Ziri. Not their weapons. Not their strength. But their willingness to suffer. Vixer, slowly. No. That's not what makes them dangerous. He turns toward the projection. Davis, Reyes, Harris, each of them calm in the face of self-inflicted torment. Vixer. What makes them dangerous is that they do not break. He takes a breath. Vixer, firmly. They bend. They bleed. They burn. He gestures toward the data streams. Vixer. But then, they rebuild. The chamber dims further. A new file opens, unclassified, raw. A clip from earlier, Reyes speaking with clarity. We don't always win. We bleed. We fall. But every time, we get back up. That's who we are. Ziri, softly. There is no logic in it. Talon. There is no algorithm for that. Verilyn. There is only will. A silence follows that feels ancient. Finally, a question is asked, not from data, not from fear, but from humility. Scholar D'Evre. If the galaxy were to fall into fire, Who would survive? The answer does not need to be spoken. It is already understood. Vixer, to the council. We came here to study danger. We discovered a mirror. A reflection of what we are not. Talon. Then the real question is not about them. He turns to face the others. Talon. The question is, are we ready? The final debriefing. Zorian vessel, observation core. A place reserved for critical insight, not routine discussion. Massive rings of transparent light rotate slowly in the air, displaying every pulse, scan, and result from the human trials. But the lights are dimmer now, not in power, but in certainty. Professor Vixer stands alone at the center platform. Around him, scholars, students, and aides tuned to maximum awareness. His bioluminescence glows with an uncommon hue, not authority, but quiet reverence. A final recording plays overhead. Captain raises voice, from earlier. We test ourselves. We suffer. But we do it so we'll be stronger next time. That's not madness. That's preparation. The projection freezes on her face. Calm. Resolute. Human. Vixer turns slowly. Vixer. This study is now concluded. A hush spreads. Some expected more data. Others, more trials. But Vixer speaks differently now. Vixer, firmly. We set out to quantify tolerance. To chart their breaking point. And instead, we found, they do not break. He looks around the chamber, pausing to meet the gaze of each listener. Vixer. Their strength is not genetic. Not chemical. It is will. Woven into the marrow of their being. Sharpened by history. Tempered by fire. He raises one arm, activating a console. Vixer. Effective immediately, the Zorian Council is opening a cultural exchange not for observation, but for understanding. Ziri, stepping forward, stunned. You want to learn from them? Vixer, nodding. Yes. Not as subjects. As mentors. The council stirs. Scholar d'oeuvre. But they are volatile. Reckless. Vixer, quietly. And yet, they endure. A new file is queued titled not Biological Report or Toxicology Review, but Human Resilience, an Emergent Model for Survival in Chaos. Zol. You believe we can learn to withstand what they do? Vixer. No. But we can learn why they choose to. He turns back toward the frozen image of the humans. Vixer. We studied their pain. But it is their choice to endure that defines them. A final protocol is activated. The observation footage is archived. A secure channel is established between Earth and the Zorian Council. A message is prepared. The humans will be invited back not as test subjects, but as speakers. As guides. As survivors of something no Zorian has ever tasted. Raw adversity. Chosen suffering. Unbreakable will. Ziri, quietly. And what will we teach them in return? Vixer, softly, after a pause. How to see their strength, as more than just instinct. As wisdom. Final visual. Outside the vessel, space stretches infinite and cold. But now one small transmission leaves the ship, pulsing through the void. A signal. A beginning. And perhaps, the first real question the Zorians have asked in 1,000 years. How do we become stronger, without fear of pain? So, we've witnessed an unbelievable encounter between alien beings and humans, two opposing worlds, through which humans demonstrate a resilience and willingness to face challenges that even the most advanced civilizations can't comprehend. Humans, with their ability to endure and even enjoy things that most other species would avoid, left the Zorian students completely baffled. From eating toxic substances like capsaicin, drinking alcohol, to consuming fermented fish, all of it unfolded before their eyes as if it were completely normal. This is certainly just the beginning of a mysterious story that we will continue to explore in future videos. The Zorian students still can't fully understand why humans willingly faced such challenges. They've opened a door, but the true answer about human nature, about their ability to endure and overcome pain, is still full of surprises waiting for us. If you're curious and want to explore more strange and fascinating stories from the universe, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos. We will continue this journey together, discovering mysterious beings in the universe and stories you never could have imagined. See you in the next video.